Hello, everyone. On behalf of Data Connect Australia, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Felicity Flack, and I'm the Senior Manager for Strategies and Services at Data Connect Australia. Mikhalina, next slide. Thank you. I'm speaking to you today from the University of Western Australia, whose campus is situated on Noongar land. The Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs, and knowledge. Some of you will already be aware that we've changed our name from the Population Health Research Network to Data Connect Australia. It's a new name, and we have a continuing commitment to supporting researchers use linked data in their research. We are funded by the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our work, Data Connect Australia sits at the heart of Australia's data ecosystem, bringing together data, people, institutions to support world-class research. And through nationally coordinated data linkage infrastructure and secure research environments, we help researchers access and use data safely and responsibly for public benefit. Just a few housekeeping messages for today's webinar. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please type them in the Q&A box at any time during the presentations and demonstration. And we'll try and answer as many questions as possible after the presentations have finished. We are recording the presentation, and we will make that available on our YouTube channel as soon as possible after the webinar. So that's enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to Mikhalina Drombovskaya, who's going to tell you about this exciting new project and tool that we're launching today.
Thank you, Felicity, and thank you everybody for joining us for today's webinar. A quick recap, some of you may have attended our March webinar where our colleagues from the AHW and ABS gave us a rundown of the National Health Data Hub, or NHDH, and the Person-Level Integrated Data Resource, or PLIDA. We also mentioned in that webinar that we were working on an online tool called the Data Access Pathways Explorer, which is designed to help researchers weigh up their options when it comes to the different pathways through which linked data can be accessed. Given many of those today may not have seen the previous webinar, we'll give a short orientation about the process leading up to the creation of this online tool, and then go into how we designed and built the tool, what it can and cannot be used for, who it's intended for, and how you can get the most out of using the Data Access Pathways Explorer and the suite of tools we have to released over the past few years. As Felicity mentioned, please note we're in the process of rebranding, and as mentioned, our website content, tool branding, and other information may still appear occasionally in the coming slides or demo as the Population Health Research Network, or PHRN, rather than our current name as Data Connect Australia. As Felicity has already mentioned, Data Connect Australia is a national research infrastructure funded through the Australian Government's National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. Our mission is to lead and enable the linking of data in Australia for world-class research. Australia is a federation consisting of 7 states and territories and the Commonwealth or federal government. Australia's national linkage infrastructure makes it possible to link administrative data as well as other types of non-government data across jurisdictions, whether that's linking data between states and territories or between states, territories, and the Commonwealth. And this allows researchers to utilise data for national projects across multiple levels of government. Our data linkage landscape has evolved into an ecosystem of jurisdictional and national pre-linked data assets alongside one-self linkage services through jurisdictional data linkage units. Researchers can now access linked data through multiple pathways, which is a good thing. However, What researchers may not know is that each pathway has different considerations and trade-offs. Different pathways offer access to different combinations of data sets, time periods, data granularity, governance and ethics requirements, costs, and timeframes. This increases complexity of research for researchers exploring what pathway can best meet their research needs. And this challenge isn't unique to Australia. There are other countries such as the UK and Canada where um, federated and multi-linkage systems are increasing the complexity for researchers to navigate. We know that it's important for researchers to understand access pathways and make informed choices. So how can we help them find the right path for their research needs? A few years ago, Data Connect Australia led a national consultation to discover how we could help researchers navigate this increasingly complex and evolving landscape, particularly for research involving cross-jurisdictional data linkage. We also wanted to see how equivalent data sets differed when accessed through key national pre-linked data assets versus through state and territory data linkage units. We initially researched publicly facing information that's available online. We spoke with subject matter experts, including data custodians and representatives from state, territory, and Commonwealth government. And we also engaged with a consultancy to help us understand how researchers navigate these complex spaces and had a researcher or end user consultation, which helped us understand how researchers make decisions when presented with different options to access linked cross-jurisdictional data. Here are some key findings from that consultation. The information that was available online was not sufficient for informed decision making because researchers couldn't easily compare options side by side. Researchers made their decisions through a consistent hierarchy. They prioritized dataset availability over project cost and timeframes. Researchers needed specific advice, not general information about data linkage and linkage processes. And when more than one pathway could answer a researcher's project needs, researchers chose the path of least resistance, but never at the cost of the data quality. So all things being equal, researchers wanted to access the best data that's available in the most efficient way possible, and they were willing to make trade-offs so long as their non-negotiable project requirements could be met. One of the recommendations in this national consultation final report was a self-directed online tool that would allow side-by-side real-time comparison of data sets or data access pathways. This would allow researchers to more easily consider and determine trade-offs. In 2025, we began work on an online tool that would help researchers do exactly that. This is a quote from one of our stakeholders during a co-design session that we held, and it really resonated with us as it highlighted that something that we believe in, that the tool should fulfill a genuine need for the researcher community. So the online tool, which you know by now is called the Data Access Pathways Explorer, it incorporates some of the key insights from the national consultation. The questions represent the criteria we used in the tool to help differentiate between key features of equivalent data sets accessible through different pathways. The questions also force researchers to think about their research question more concretely when using the tool and to really consider the non-negotiable or essential criteria and the nice-to-have criteria. It took approximately a year to co-design, build, test, and launch the Data Access Pathways Explorer. This is in conjunction with other parallel projects we were working on. Along with some new additions, many of the stakeholders who participated in the 2024 national consultation also participated in the tool co-design. So we had a great continuity. We held multiple sessions and review opportunities for the content that was going into the tool and how it would be presented. Stakeholders were also responsible for auditing dataset criteria and business rules for the access pathways. Earlier this year, we engaged with an external vendor who had already worked with us on other online tools created using Power BI. We were keen to leverage the vendor's considerable prior experience so that we could hit the ground running. In May, we spent an intensive 3 weeks working with the vendor to build the tool and conduct a series of iterative end user or researcher testing sessions. We recently soft launched the tool on our website, and today we're officially launching it. This is where we started. What you're seeing is a prototype of the Data Access Pathways Explorer, a visual mock-up made in PowerPoint. As mentioned, Kate Miller from the Data Connect Australia team had already worked closely with the vendor on a separate project to create online self-service price calculators so researchers could work out data linkage costs. The prototype for the Data Access Pathways Explorer was therefore visually modeled on the price calculator tool as our natural starting point. And here are some numbers to give you a sense of the scope of input that went into refining the prototype. So in just over 11 months of development, we had 9 stakeholder groups involved in co-design, 20 online co-design sessions with stakeholders, 10 end-user testing sessions, 14 online build, test, and iterate sessions, and 4 substantive design iterations. Some of the improvements we made included multi-page flow, cleaner and smoother navigation. We really focused on UX design and took the time to get this right. Changes to the wording and improved labeling, lots of simplification and getting rid of jargon, making the available contact information more readily visible and clearer, and making the tool more responsive overall so that pathway options would display as soon as a user began interacting with the tool. There was no need to complete all the required steps before options became visible. That's just a comment from one of our end users in a late testing session. I'd like to briefly go over the tool and who it is intended for, what exactly it does, what information it covers, and some important considerations and caveats. So the tool is primarily designed for researchers exploring whether there is a current pathway to access linked data for their research project. It can be used by client services teams or others working in linkage infrastructure support services as well to help respond to researcher queries or data requests. So you would probably have some idea by now that the tool helps researchers discover which pathway options may be available for them to access their desired linked data sets for research purposes. It displays pathway options. However, where a pathway option is not available based on the criteria selected by the user, the tool explicitly explains why those criteria could not be met. This allows a feedback loop where the user can go back to the dataset and criteria selection and fine-tune their parameters to see if a pathway then becomes available. And importantly, the tool directs the user to contact the relevant client services team once one or more pathway options are established. There are currently 5 options for pathways that are within this tool. On the left, you'll see there is a pathway for access via one of the local jurisdictional data linkage units if the project involves linkage of data sets from a single jurisdiction. So I've written here PHRN, but this will shortly become Data Connect Australia. So access to linked data via the PHRN/Data Connect Australia pathway for multi or cross-jurisdictional projects. This is for projects that would require a bespoke once-off linkage for a specific project. On the right-hand side, we have access to several linked data assets, including access via the AHW's National Health Data Hub, or access via the ABS's Person Level Integrated Data Resource, PLIDA, or access via WA's People WA asset. This is the first iteration of the tool. It is scalable and responsive, so more pathway options can be added over time should interest or appetite for this grow. Erika will shortly run through a demo of the tool and talk in detail about the content and functionality, but just to give you a quick overview, the tool has an extensive menu listing hundreds of data sets from which to choose from, and these are thematically grouped. Every data set is currently listed, that is currently listed on data linkage unit websites. The NHDH, PLIDA, and People WA website is also listed, bar a few exceptions, and all the data sets that are currently listed in the metadata platform are also listed on this. The Data Access Pathways Explorer also contains tooltips against every step and criteria and a comprehensive FAQ section. Some caveats and considerations. Firstly, it's important to note that the datasets listed in the dataset menu and the 5 pathway options presented are not an exhaustive list of either the available datasets for linkage or available pathway options to access linked data. They are, however, frequently used in accessed datasets and access pathways. So, for example, an important consideration is that the tool does not currently include a pathway option showing access to consented MBS, PBS, and air data via Services Australia. Secondly, the dataset criteria used to determine what access pathways are available are also not exhaustive. For example, the tool may not be suitable for projects that require complex control selection or genealogical linkage, perhaps linkage to obscure, never before linked datasets that have complex governance and legal frameworks or other project-specific needs that are beyond the scope of the tool. Which brings us to the third point. For complex projects, the tool may not be suitable and researchers will need to seek advice from client services officers regarding their specific needs. And finally, it's a valuable way to understand what can be accessed currently, not what may be accessed sometime in the future. The focus is on access pathways that have been previously demonstrated, have established governance and ethics processes, and have existing infrastructure to undertake the linkage. So the tool serves as a guide. It shows what pathway option or options are available and who to get in touch with to discuss further. It doesn't replace direct advice from client services officers who will be able to give that tailored context for your research project. What it will tell you is who to reach out to in the first instance to discuss project goals. Pathway options may also change over time, reflecting the evolving linkage landscape. So it's important to periodically check back, especially if months have passed or the proposed research project parameters have changed over time. We will be conducting an evaluation in the coming months to see whether the tool, whether researchers are using the tool in the way that it's intended and whether they're finding it useful. And we really want to continue improving the Data Access Pathways Explorer so it meets researchers' needs, and we welcome any and all feedback. We'll be scheduling regular maintenance and back-end updates and exploring potentially connecting at the back end to the PHRN Data Connect Australia metadata platform via an API. And I'm sure many of you are thinking it would be great if the Data Access Pathways Explorer could account for project costs and timeframes when showing access pathway options. We have developed a suite of online price calculators, as mentioned previously, in collaboration with data linkage units and the ABS in a project led by Kate Miller from our team. These are available from our website, and you can scan that QR code if you want to check those out. As for timeframes, measuring timeframes remains a significant challenge, and we don't currently have a definitive measure for this. However, we'd like to consider both costs and timeframes in a future iteration of the tool should the opportunity arise. Erika will shortly take over to give you a demo of the Data Access Pathways Explorer. And as mentioned, we are in the midst of rebranding, so there may be instances where we are PHRN or Population Health Research Network in the tool, but it will shortly become Data Connect Australia in the near future. Over to you, Erika.
Thanks so much, Mikhalina. I will just share my screen. Okay, great. So now I'm really happy to walk you through the Data Access Pathways Explorer. You can find this on our website. So, oops. And you access it through clicking on this link. When you first click on the link to that Data Access Pathways Explorer, it will take you to these important notes. And specifically, this outlines a few of the things that Mikhalina just went through. So those considerations and caveats that the Data Access Pathways Explorer really aims to help you identify which pathway or pathway options are currently available to access the linked data that you need for your research project. It specifies which pathway options are presented in the Data Access Pathways Explorer, and it specifies which pathways are not in the Explorer. So, for example, it doesn't include the pathway for accessing MBS, PBS, or AIR data via Services Australia. You can click on hyperlinks here to access the web pages and also through the Client Services team. It does advise that the pathway options provided are for guidance only. They don't account for all project criteria. They may not be exhaustive, and they do not confirm project feasibility. And you are required to acknowledge that by clicking on that link. Okay, so this takes you to the first page or the datasets page of the Data Access Pathways Explorer. The first thing you need to do is go to step 1 and select the datasets you want for your research project. You can do this by searching by dataset name or by scrolling to the relevant category. So the datasets are rolled up into categories. Sorry, I'm just, as you can see here. And you actually need to check on the specific dataset that you require. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical example that I will propose. So I'll propose that I'm interested in linking my clinical trial cohort, which has participants recruited in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria, to hospital admissions and emergency department data, as well as death data. So I'll start by searching and then selecting hospital admitted patient data. So for New South Wales, Queensland. Sorry, I'm really finding it hard here. You'll notice as I do this that other section of this page automatically update, specifically the pathway options dialog box on the right. So over here has now green lighted both the PHRN or the Data Connect Australia and the National Health Data Hub pathways as being available options. And it indicates that the other pathway options, so through the local DLU, PLIDA and People WA, are not available pathways. In the middle panel, under step 3, I can see and review the pathways available for the datasets I've selected. And from here, I can also click on these hyperlinks where available, and they'll take me to the metadata platform where I can review metadata, including variable lists, for example, for the specific datasets that I want to link. At this point, I will mention that you can also see these tooltips shown by the question mark icons, and they will give you more information and explanation on the item. So I'll go back and add the other data sets that I needed. So add in emergency department data. Oh, sorry. And Victoria. You can see in the pathway options box again that both options are still available through the PHRN and the hub. And then death data. Death registrations in this instance. Okay. So as I mentioned in this hypothetical scenario, I want to link these administrative data sets that I've selected, so hospital admitted, emergency department and death data, to my own clinical cohort. So the next step is to go to step 2, any additional data sets. I want to click yes and select, I've got my own study cohort that has been consented for linkage. Both pathway options are now still available. Okay, so now what I can see under step 3, I can see the data sets that I've selected are available in the local DEO or PHRN pathway, the NHDH pathway, and I can also see that 3 of the data sets, namely the death registrations, are available in the PLIDA pathway. But PLIDA hasn't been green lighted here because this will only give you the pathway options when all of your selected data sets are available in that pathway. The other thing I can review here and double check is that if I've got the right jurisdiction. So you can see I've got New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria. Okay, the other thing to note here is this call to action box. So now it's telling me to go to criteria. So this is the next page on the Data Access Pathways Explorer. Okay, so step 4, I need to specify the date from which I need data for all data sets from. So we're going to say I recruited my cohort last year and I want a look back period of 10 years. So I can use this slider to move it along to 2015. Oops. Or I can also type it in here. Having defined that criteria, both pathway options are still available. The call to action box is telling me to go on to step 5. So next at step 5, I need to consider the recency of data I would like. So how current I want the data to be at the time of data extraction, For my clinical trial, I would ideally like data as recent as possible. So I will see if those pathways are available if I select recency of 6 or less months. And you can actually see straight away in this dialog box that that's knocked out both pathway options. So I'll change my recency criteria to less than or equal to 12 months. Both options are still unavailable. So I'm going to say whatever is available so that I've still got some pathway options here. I've requested linkage to hospital data, so I do need to go to step 6. And here I can specify whether I need public only hospital admitted data or public and private or private. When I click public and private, you can see that that knocks out both of these options. So I'm going to go back for this example just to do public only for this example. You follow on to step 7, and this is asking about the level of geographic granularity. So I'm going to choose that I'd like it at postcode level or SA2 in equivalent data sets. And then in terms of date of birth granularity, I require data as month and year. You can see both of these two options are still available. The last thing is that I will choose to access the data from my collaborators who are just from within Australia. So now that I've selected all of the different criteria, I still have both options open. And if I go, the next call to action is to go to pathways. So this is the next tab down here. So I can go here and it directs me to, it advises that both of those options, based on the data sets and the criteria sections that I chose, can go through either the PHRN pathway or the National Health Data Hub pathway. And it advises to contact those teams. We've got hyperlinks here, so you can go straight to contacting them. But at this point, I'll also show you the FAQ page that Mikhalina mentioned, where again, we've got more hyperlinks through to the client services teams of the 5 pathways, and also other useful web links, including our Data Connect Australia price calculators, which Mikhalina also mentioned. And here as well, you can see the different FAQs related to the Data Access Pathways Explorer. Okay, I think given the time, I'll run through another quick hypothetical example, and also to show you and to note that what you may like to do at any point using the Data Access Pathways Explorer is restart or reset and restart your query. So to completely clear, you need to both go to the criteria page and press the reset button. Seeing if that resets it. Yeah. And then the datasets page. And reset that also. Okay, so for the next quick example, I will say that I'm conducting a consented longitudinal cohort study of individuals diagnosed with childhood cancer. And I'd like to link my longitudinal cohort with MBS, PBS, and air data. So I'm going to choose them again, going back to step 1. Okay. And then I'm going to, and you can already see that we've got two green lighted. In this case, it's the National Health Data Hub and the Person Level Integrated Data Asset Pathway. I will select my additional data set, which again is my own longitudinal cohort that has been consented for linkage. So under step 3, I can see the 3 data sets selected can all be accessed through both pathways, hence why these have both gone green. And I can also see that the only jurisdiction that's involved in this linkage is Commonwealth. So the next call to action is to go to the criteria page again. Okay, so for this example, given that the oldest individuals in my cohort are 15 and I want to access data from all data sets from when they were born, so I'll pop in 2010 and both pathways are still available. I need to analyze data that is less than a year old because we want to analyze recent and current medication and immunization history of the teenagers. So I'm selecting less than or equal to 12 months. And you can see that by selecting this recency of data, that the National Health Data Hub is no longer a viable pathway for the data set selected. I'm not directed to go to step 6 because I haven't chosen any hospital admitted data, so I can go straight to step 7, apologies. With the glider pathway, I'm interested to see if I can request a high level of geographic granularity, so SA1. And you can see that, yes, this has stayed green, so I can choose that criteria. So I'll see if I can also access linked data that provides full date of birth. That's knocked out glider as well. So I know that, well, I'll check. I can, however, access data for analysis that is in for date of birth that's in month and years. I have collaborators in the UK for this project, so I'd like members of my team from both within Australia and overseas to access the linked data. And you can see that this is still an option with the PLIDA pathway. So the next step, as directed here in the call to action box, is to go to the pathways page. Here, not only does it give me the available pathway of PLIDA and can go straight to contacting the PLIDA client services team, it also gives me, shows me what criteria weren't met for the NHDH pathway. So I can go, okay, so the data recency criteria knocked it out, and also the geographic granularity. And so if I wanted, I could go back. It advises me to go to step 5 and step 7. If I pop in whatever is available, and also at step 7, perhaps if I just do postcode level, then the National Health Data Hub pathway is available. So we really, I guess, hope that use of this Data Access Pathways Explorer will help you explore the options that are available for your research projects, and to consider what options may be available or not, depending on your project constraints and how much flexibility or trade-offs you're willing to make with that or able to make with that. And as I think Mikhalina mentioned, it's really the Data Access Pathways Explorer can be a starting point for your project. And from here, we'd really encourage you to reach out to the relevant client services teams to discuss your project in more detail for the pathway options that are available to you. And I'll stop sharing and pass back.
Wonderful. Thanks, Erica, for that excellent demo. Before we move on to questions, we just wanted to acknowledge the contribution of all our stakeholders who collaborated with us and were instrumental in the development of the Data Access Pathways Explorer. We also wanted to mention that if you're interested in joining our Data Connect Australia linked data research community of practice, and you haven't already, could you please complete this survey using the QR code or email us if you prefer. Based on your feedback, we're planning a number of activities for the coming year, and we would love your input and engagement.